Well, hello everyone. It's Cassandra Williamson. I realize I'm about 5 seconds late. My apologies for that. I am coming to you from a holler in eastern Kentucky. So, yeah, we got a few things to talk about on this Friday evening. So, this evening I turned on Fox News, or at least it was on in the living room where my mom and brother actually sleep all day, mostly, right now anyway. And they're eating supper, or at least mom's eating supper. So, it's been a good busy day today. We accomplished a lot of things. At the noontime show for the midday with Cassandra, we were talking about some winning the war on words kind of stuff. I did not know at the time that there was another organization out there. It's a nonprofit, actually, though, and my business is a for-profit business. But there's another organization, a nonprofit, that had been talking about winning the war on words too, and I found out about it by listening to the Fox news program, actually opinion program, The Five. And lo and behold, Greg Gutfeld was talking about words that's the think tank and the Democratic side, the liberal side, um, has put out a list of words that they say that we need to get away from. And that's what I was trying. That's what I was talking about today too. And it's really funny because I was talking about it at midday. Quite a few people were watching the show. There were a few people watching. I don't know who they all were or where they were from. And then the Five picks up on the same topic. So I'm glad to be leading the show a little bit, guiding you guys along. But they were making fun of it because this is more of a center left organization. Third Way is the organization put out their list of words, also published today, about things that Democrats need to get away from if you're going to win the war, win the elections, and try to win back any kind of electoral support going forward. Because some things you just need to change. You need to talk the way ordinary people talk out in the community. And I know I am not the one to actually say stuff like that because I do use big words a lot of times, and I'm not saying that people don't understand all those big words, but it turns people off. I use academic words, or I use the scientific language that I know, or stuff like that. I'll throw things out there that just kind of, people turn it off. They go click, 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 and then go somewhere else. I get it. I do get it. I understand that quite well. But I just wanted to point out that with Fox News The Five, it's actually talking about these words and things that I had been talking about earlier today during the noontime show, the midday with Cassandra. And here they are, they're talking about them today. So, it kind of feels good to know that somebody's watching. But they dug it up even further. They went down and found this organization called Third Way, and I didn't know that they existed. I'd never heard of the Third Way, which is a nonprofit that's center left, that's trying to make sure that we can communicate with people across the board. So I've got in front of me a list of things that I wanted to talk about in relation to this. And I just want to thank the Five for pointing it all out to me and telling me about the Third Way. Actually, they were talking about the one. I had to go look it up and dig into it just a little bit to find it. But it actually is something that was published on Politico, and from the organization called Third Way. One of the co-founders of that organization actually wrote this list of things that we need to be talking about to change the narrative slightly in the country. So one of the biggest things we have going against us is the fact that the far right, have learned how to take the words that we use to define things. They're academic sounding words. They're kind of aloof and all that, but they're taking them and weaponizing them against the left. And we've got to defuse that somehow. We've got to figure out a way to talk with people so that they can at least see what we're actually saying, and that it actually makes sense what we're saying. Because right now, if you use a word like birthing person, I got news for you. You're immediately just disenfranchised. You immediately just lost the center, the moderates, because moderates don't talk like that. Moderates don't go around talking like birthing person or whatever. They just don't talk like that. Oh my God. This is a pregnant person. That's what that is. That's a birthing person is a female capable of giving birth. And we need to start acknowledging that it's a birthing person. Oh my God. Stop with the craziness. All right. Stop with the craziness. You lose people every time you say that. And I'm going to guess that every time you use a word like that, you're going to lose whoever's watching. The moderates who are watching your show or watching you talk or listening to you talk. If you use language like that, you aren't going to get their vote, especially if you do it consistently and all the time. And every time you talk to somebody, they're going, and if you're one of these people who are out here going, you've got to use the right pronoun or you've got to use the right word to describe all this stuff and gender affirming care this and gender affirming care that and women or trans women in women's sports and things like that, you lost it already. You lost the battle. It's done. You've lost it. And that's what I was saying at the noon program today too, that we have to stop with all of these crazy words and things and making demands on people and imposing ourselves on others, because we can be pretty darn arrogant, can't we? Pretty darn aloof, and we're good at it. So good at it, we lost the election. Oh my gosh. So I was talking about all this stuff earlier today, and I mean, it's just goofy. I'm trying to find here a list of these words and things like that. Oh, we've got some things. I got this right here. Let me just kind of go down some of these lists. This is the problem. Okay, introduction. This is from, was it something I said, from The Third Way? All right. And these are talking points that I created for this show from that PDF document. It's called Was It Something I Said by Third Way. All right. The Third Way. So mention the article to you. We all want to stop all of these social attacks, the attacks on trans and minority people in this country. We want to stop it all because most people realize it's just bullying. It's just bullying. It's cruelty for the sake of cruelty. We know that's what it is. People in the middle recognize it too. But whenever we start saying things like, oh, I don't know, protect trans kids, I'm going to tell you what I think about that. We should get away from that conversation entirely. We should get away from it entirely. Here's why. Parents are the ones who need to make those decisions with their doctors, their professional doctors, their licensed doctors. That's a decision for the family to make and not the federal government. I mean, that's the libertarian view, right? We should not be engaged in making decisions. The federal government has no business telling you how to raise your kids, and that's what they're doing. They're interjecting themselves into your lives and your decisions. They're stripping away all of those things that allow you to make decisions for your own health and well-being. And that is not conservative. That is not what it means to be conservative. That's actually something way over there in the ditch on the right side. We need to start framing our language and the way we talk about this stuff in that context. This is an attack on basic freedom for all Americans. When they start interjecting into the healthcare and putting themselves as the federal government or the state government between you and your doctors, they're stripping away freedoms for all Americans. That's what they're doing. They're covering it up in language like, oh, we're protecting kids. No, they're bullying kids. That's what they're doing. They're using kids as a way to gain political points with some people who have been persuaded that this is a big problem and it's not a big problem. But that doesn't matter. That argument does not work. It doesn't influence anyone or change anyone's mind when you say this is not as big a problem as they make it out to be. But no, that doesn't work. You know why it doesn't work? You know why? Because they've spent so much time, the right has spent so much time out there giving you personal stories of people that these decisions have impacted. Whether it would be like Riley Gaines talking about women or trans women in sports, whether it is someone talking about, that they were persuaded as a kid to transition and then realized that they really didn't want to go that way years later or a year later or whenever. We start talking about stuff like that, and that's what they're doing. They're putting that focus on those individuals. And here we are trying to think, and we on the left are going, but it's an intellectual thing. We know these things are to be this or that or whatever, and we're talking academic language to them. We're using words and things that are transitory because the language that describes all these things is going to be different next year than this year. And it was different 5 years ago than it is now. Typically what's happening is the kids coming into college, the new college age kids, they're defining new terminology and new ways of seeing themselves and describing themselves. And it's becoming part of the lexicon, part of the language that we use to define everything. And it changes with a new generation of kids going into college. The language is different today than it was 20 years ago talking about these topics, or 30 years ago. It changes. That's a natural thing. It changes. There's no such thing as this word is the way it was, but always been, and all that. It changes along the way. But we've got to stop. We've got to stop falling into this trap of attacking the things that they keep talking about. Now, we have to do something about that. We have to do something about what they're saying, but we've got to point it out for what it really is. And we've got to use the language that people actually use here in the valleys, here in the hollers of Eastern Kentucky. We have to be able to talk to them the words that they are familiar with, not the words that we think they should be familiar with. Birthing person means absolutely crap to people here. That is an immediate turnoff. You lost this area over words like that. And for the left to get out here and make pronouncements and say, this is what we have to do, this is how you have to say it, and this is what you got to do with things like that. You have to use birthing person, and you have to use inseminated person, or you've got to use migrant rather than illegal alien coming into the country. You've got to use the words that they use here if you want to get back into a position of authority in this country, in the federal government, state governments, local governments. You've got to talk to the people who are here. And that's a hard thing, especially if you've had any kind of training outside of that. And I mean, it's difficult for me to do because I immediately fall into something that is like either statistics or biology and genetics and epigenetics. I can throw all those things out there. I know a lot about all of them. I don't know it all about all of them, but I know something about all of them. A lot of them. But that's what we have to do. And we've got to stop it. We've got to do it in a way that it comes across as being normal. Just what everybody else says. And the title of this piece from the Third Way, which is called, Was It Something I Said? Exactly what it was. Exactly what it is. That's how it works, folks. So there's a disconnect between intent. I'm going to go right down to the problem. A disconnect between intent and effect. In the memo or the PDF that was here, and I'm just going to kind of read directly off of here. The memo argues that while the intent of this language is positive, to include broaden, empathize, accept, and embrace, the actual effect is often the opposite. And that's what they said. The language can make speakers sound extreme, divisive, elitist, and like enforcers of wokeness. That's happened to me, folks. Articles I've written, the pieces I've put out, things like that. Some people have responded back to me by saying, you shouldn't be acknowledging anything over there that Trump is doing and calling it good because he's attacking us and therefore everything he's doing is bad. No, that's not the case, folks. The world is not black and white. Whenever you begin to talk to people in that way, that respects their opinions and their views on things, even though you might disagree with them vehemently, you still have to be able to talk to them in a way that comes across as being, from the holler. Now, you don't have to sound like me when you do it. Come on. I mean, look, you got this and you got this. But yeah, that's really what it amounts to. Okay, so, oh my goodness. Let me go on to the next side of this thing. Let's see what else I wrote over here. Put on this thing. All right, the memo breaks down the alienating language into several categories. Therapy speak is one of them. I'm more empathetic than you. This language implies I'm more empathetic than you because you use all these big words and stuff like that. Or people, you've been taught those things, and you talk that way because that's what you've been around in your academic life. And I've spent more time in academia than I care to admit, probably, but I actually loved it. Anyway, these include words like privilege, because to the common person, privilege doesn't mean what it means in academia. Privilege here means, oh, you had enough money to get around and be happy and survive and all that kind of thing. And you didn't have to worry about anything because you had the money to be able to make it. That's one form of privilege, but that's not what the academics are talking about when they say privilege. Triggering, microaggressions, words like that. Seminar room language. That's another one. That's from this memo called, was it something I said? Seminar language. I'm smarter and more concerned about important issues than you. This is what this says when you talk like this, okay? Examples include systems of oppression. That is nonsense to someone in the hollers of Eastern Kentucky. Nonsense. Just craziness. Cultural appropriation. And existential threat. Now, I've used that term. I've used all of these things because, that's my background. But it persuades no one. They aren't listening. They run from those words. Another one is, let's go right on down here, gender and orientation correctness. Oh, this is a biggie. This is particularly poignant for me, okay? This language can suggest to listeners that your views on traditional genders and gender roles are at best quaint. Yeah. That's exactly what it says to people who just don't care about all those other words you want to use. And this includes birthing person, chest feeding, cisgender, the word cisgender, LGBTQIA+. If you go all the way out with all that kind of thing, it says, this language, that your views on traditional gender and gender roles are at best quaint because you don't know those things. And, got to get away from it. The memo argues that building a broad coalition requires creating empathy, not confusing or shaming people who could otherwise be allies. That's exactly right. Now, I'm prone to drive people away because I happen to say a lot of this stuff, and I say it pretty emphatically and all of that. So the shifting language of racial constructs, that's the next category. These words can signal that talking about race is even more of a minefield, where you can be called racist for not using the latest term, right? These include words like Latinx, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, BIPOC. That's a word used in academia. Intersectionality. Kimberly Crenshaw's that's not Kimberly's name's not here, but she's the one who actually did a lot of work in that field. Intersectionality. Yeah, it's a valid field. I mean, it actually explains things quite well. But if you use terms like that, well, then you're obviously, you're trying to imply that you know more than somebody else, or you have a more up-to-date understanding of things. And that's what it says. But that doesn't fly here in the hills, folks. It questions whether this terminology is contributing to Democrats losing support from non-white voter groups. Explaining away crime. Oh, this is a big one. This is a big one, too. This language says the criminal is the victim. And guess what they say all the time over there, over on Fox News and different platforms over on the right? The Democrats, this is what they were saying, the Democrats consider the criminal the victim, and the victim of the actual crime is not worthy of their time. The victim is an afterthought. And that's how it comes across whenever you use words like that, whenever you imply certain things. This includes, examples include justice involves, incarceration, incarcerated person. Just use the words that people understand on the street. Okay, justice involved. They broke the law. The police caught them, and now they're paying the consequences of it. Okay, that's what it is, and they've spent time in jail for it. Okay, so that's what that sounds like in the hills. That it ought to be. That's the way it should be said, right? The consequences. Voters leave the conversation. Yes, that's exactly what I've been saying for a while now. Much of this language acts as a red flag for a sizable segment of the American public. Every time you use those words, you're immediately considered woke and dismissed because of it in the middle of the country and flyover country. The member states this isn't because these voters are bigots, but because they fear cancellation, doxing, or trouble with HR if they make a mistake. Others simply don't understand the terms and grow distrustful of those who use them. And the result is that instead of engaging, these potential allies keep quiet. They don't join the conversation. They leave it. They run somewhere else where the people are talking, with, words you find on the street. Okay. The path forward. Here's the path forward. This is the part that matters to all of you as well. Invite, don't repel. That's the note I want to put out there in the last few seconds of this show today. The memo clarifies it is not trying to police language, ban phrases, or create our own form of censorship. No. We have enough with echo chambers going on around here. People are trying to police the people inside the chamber to keep them in line. And we can't be doing that. We're not telling you those words can't be used. You can use them in the right place, though. And when you're talking to potential voters in the middle of the electorate in the country, then you're going to need to talk to them where they are and not where you think they should be. The solution is for public-facing communication to use language that will invite, not repel. Start a conversation, not end it. Throughout those words like that, conversation basically is over. The authors argue in that piece, or was it something I said? The authors argue that the most important thing is to build a bigger army to fight for progressive causes. The memo concludes that a good start would be communicating in authentic ways that welcome rather than drive voters away. And with that, I'm going to say y'all have a good weekend. And do something fun and legal and ethical. That's legal and ethical. And remember to smile, have a good time, go out there and enjoy the weekend, go out and do whatever you got to do. Labor Day weekend is coming up soon. I hope you're getting ready for that. And I'll see you again next week. Have a great one. Bye-bye.